So last week I have been to the Sony a7C announcement in Hong Kong, the launch party, launch event in Hong Kong. And from that video, in the comment section down below, opinions are quite divided. And by the way, it's not this one. I have the a7C with me. I am actually shooting with it. Now what's that lens? I will talk about that later. Just a little comments in the last video. I have really mixed feeling about this camera as well. Let me try to explain. I just love a small camera, especially for a full frame camera this small. I mean, it's not ridiculously small, but it's any smaller full frame camera, I love it. Just grab it, and it's so easy to put it in your camera bag. Yeah, it's just easy, and it doesn't look intimidating. This is what people want for a mirrorless camera, isn't it? I mean, not like a huge DSLR in your face. This is the first full-frame camera that you can use on a gimbal this small as this Cheung M2 gimbal. Also, I mean, hey, this is a really handsome camera, and it's kind of like a rangefinder style. I mean, this is it just looks much better than the Canon RP. The Canon RP, when I first saw the Canon RP, I think the problem for that is that it's supposed to be a more laid-back camera, but it still looks really serious. It just looks too serious. It looks like it wants to look pro, but then it is smaller. It's not as pro actually. And I think this is why people like Fujifilm camera. Well, one thing, they look handsome, and second thing is that they just look more laid back. It's just not taking yourself too serious, that kind of thing. And this gives me that feeling as well. With this camera, you don't have to take yourself too serious. You can just enjoy taking photos. I mean, photography camera is not just about the specification. It's also how the camera makes you feel. Well, really, it's so great using this camera. It doesn't feel that any difference at all compared this to other A7. Especially it has real-time tracking, which even the A7 Mark II doesn't have. With this, I would use AFC most of the time. I seldomly have to change it to AFS. This saves me from changing focus mode at all. At first, I thought Sony claimed that this is the smallest and lightest full-frame camera. Turns out, I mean, some people point out that Sigma FP full-frame camera smaller than this, and then actually the Canon EOS RP is lighter than this. Turns out what Sony means is that the smallest and lightest full-frame camera with built-in stabilisation. I mean, yeah, you can always find something that's different and just claim it the smallest and lightest full-frame camera with a Sony badge on it. So yeah. And of course, people would point out that this is a full-frame camera. Full-frame lenses is not small at all, and especially Sony doesn't really have a small kit lens for it. So this is the first small-ish kit lens. This is a 28 to 60 f4 to 5.6. I mean, they do have other smaller prime lenses. Their prime lenses, the Sony size prime lenses, are quite sweet. Well, this is good for still photos. I've been using it. It is all right, but 28mm may not be wide enough for a lot of people, and especially 28mm is really not that enough for vlogging. I mean, if I want to get more around me, I have to extend my arm to that, and it's just really tiring, even with a lighter camera like this. And this comes back to the problem with just like the ZV-1. ZV-1 have a 24mm lens, but then you want to use digital stabilization and it becomes almost like 28mm. So it kind of like, yeah, it kind of works, but you want a wide lens, at least 24 millimeters. Yeah, also when you import this into a computer, you might want to stabilize it in your computer, and that will crop in even further than this. And it becomes 30 millimeters, like that. Especially when you look at the Nikon offer, the 24 to 50 millimeters pancake lens, really similar to the Sony one, but much more useful zoom range. Also the new 20 to 60 millimeters from Panasonic, this is a really useful lens. Of course it is much bigger, but still really light. But that doesn't really matter too much because Sony full frame mirrors have been around for years, and now you have other choices other than Sony lenses. Well, Sigma lenses are huge, but we have Tamron lenses. This is quite new, Tamron 70 to 28 millimeters f2.8. This is a f2.8 lens, around the same size as my 16 to 35 f4. The zoom range of my Sony size 16 to 35 is longer than this. This only goes up to 28 millimeters, but f2.8, and it is so light and so much cheaper than that. At the same time, I also look at this Tamron 20 millimeters f2.8. Now this is a macro lens as well. This is really light, 220 grams. Unlike Sony 20 millimeters, unlike all the Sigma 20 millimeters, this f2.8 pretty fast and really so much smaller and cheaper. This is really cheap. Something interesting is that the 20 millimeters, the Sony actually support the compensation of the lens distortion compensation. With the zoom, when you zoom in, it's actually not much distortion, but when you zoom out, there's a little bit of barrel distortion. If you turn on compensation, the barrel distortion disappears, but when you zoom in, instead it gives you pin cushion distortion, which is interesting. But then after all, it's not from Sony themselves, so these kind of things happens. Now this is the 20 millimeters, and as you can see, this is perfect for vlogging. I don't have to extend my arm fully. I can just do it like that, and yeah, it is really great. You can see a little bit of bokeh at the background. And obviously, if you want zoom lens, if you want a wider lens, you got this 17 to 28 millimeters. So now this is 17 millimeters, much wider. You can include a lot more stuff as your background. But then this lens doesn't have this lens doesn't have stabilization. So this is just rely on the A7C in-body stabilization for now. But I can tell you that that doesn't really matter if the lens doesn't have stabilization, because for Sony, it doesn't make much difference. So now this is the Sony size 16 to 35 f4, smaller aperture, but this has OSS. The lens OSS supposed to work with the camera in-body stabilization, and no, for Sony, that doesn't really much you can't really see much difference. And of course, you want to know between the A7C and my A7S II. When both using the Tamron lens without steady shot, you can see that's really low difference. The only difference is my A7S II can't focus on my face, which is really not surprising for me. Sony steady shot, the main purpose is for me to add stabilization in Final Cut Pro, which make it a bit better. Talking about video specification, is really nothing special. Also 4K, also 8-bit is a Sony. Autofocusing, as you can see in this clip, is usual Sony autofocusing, which is great. Something weird is that the auto white balance on this camera, sometimes it changes so quick and changes so much. In editing, I have to compensate it manually. And it still has the crop from A7 Mark III. 30p have 1.2 times crop. Only 24 and 25p has low crop. One thing improved is that it doesn't have time limit recording time. So naturally, I test how long it can shoot under direct sunlight under 31 degrees Celsius. In this harsh condition, it shoots for 23 minutes, which is not bad, but then if you really have to shoot under the sunlight continuously, You want to get other Sony camera which perform better than this. If you're not that 1% of population, you don't have to worry about overheating at all. During that overheating test, I find one thing really weird is that whenever I connect a power bank to the camera, it tries to connect it like a computer. Whatever setting I set in the menu about USB, I can't get it to work. Later, what I found out is that with the same cable that I have been using that working fine, whenever I use a power bank or an AC adapter, I can't get it to charge until I use a MacBook Pro AC adapter. I also tried a USB-A to USB-C cable and it doesn't work as well. After a lot of experiments, I found out the only way I can make it work is that I have been using a USB 2.0 cable, the white one, with a blue one which is support USB 3.0, then it finally works, which doesn't really make sense to me. Especially I have never had any problem with any other camera including Sony cameras. So anyway, this is a really weird behavior of this camera. It is really picky about the USB power you provided, and I hope Sony fixes this with a firmware update soon. Now this camera takes great pictures, take great video, especially it's really good for vlogging. It got a flip out screen, blah blah blah. But then I still got really mixed feeling about this camera, especially it seems like it has a lot of mixed parts from different cameras. Now people say that this is a small A7 Mark III, and that's not wrong. It's got a lot of similarity to A7 Mark III. It's seemingly, it looks like it got the same sensor because especially it costs the same amount of phase detection error points, 693 phase detection error points. And then it also only do 10 FPS burst. I mean 10 FPS is actually not bad, but then when you consider the entry-level APS-C sensor camera A6100 do 11 FPS, yeah, 10 is not bad, but then the entry-level do better than this. What? Now when you think this got a body of a A6000 series camera body, this is actually more like a A6100, the entry-level A6100. Well, I mean, okay, this has got a metal body, which is A6100 doesn't have. This is metal body, which is a really good thing. But then the grip is more like A6100. It is more. I mean, the whole thing is a bit better than A6100 because the body is thicker, so the grip is kind of bigger. But this bit is really short like an entry-level A6100, which is not good at all. This shutter button is kind of like the clicky type. When you after you half press, when you take the photo, it's a click rather than a more expensive camera which is a squeeze type. You don't have the two customizable button on top like the A6600. This is more like A6100. At the back there is no C button, the customized buttons at all. They only mark the rubbish bin button as the C button. So I mean, yeah, just like the A6100 entry-level camera. Actually, I forgot that A6100 actually got one more C1 button than the A7C. The only good news on the A7C is the video record button on top. One thing I also mentioned last time is that the EVF is absolutely tiny. This is an EVF from RX 100 Mark IV. Same as RX 100 Mark IV, it is the same 0.95 magnification and it's only a 2 million dots EVF. And you actually can see pixels or moire when you're using the EVF. This is really a quite bad EVF. I mean, the refresh rate is good, the color is good, it's no color separation, it doesn't have those RGB separation when you pan it. It is a good EVF, it's just really no resolution and it's absolutely tiny. One minor thing is that this mechanical shutter only goes up to 1/4000 of a second, which A7 Mark III or A6600 goes up to 1/8000 of a second. For this, there is a 1/8000 of a second option when you change to electronic shutter. And quite weirdly, in the menu, you can't choose between mechanical or electronic. You have to choose silent shooting. to use electronic shutter. Well, another thing is that the new really great menu from the Sony a7S III. Surprise is not on the a7C, it's still the old menu, which for me, I have been using Sony for so many years, I still get lost in this menu. What's more, shooting still and video still share the same settings. When I change from shooting still to shooting video, I have to change the picture profile, I have to change the focus area, point thing. Every single time I change from still to video or video to still, which is, oh, a lot of fun. Another thing annoying is the price of this camera. I mean, smaller camera doesn't have to mean that it has to be cheaper. But then this got 2 years old text in it and in a A60-100 body. I mean a metal A60-100 body, but still you feel that this is not as all-round camera like the A7 Mark III. In the US, this is $200 cheaper than the A7 Mark III, but in a lot of parts in the world, for example, in here, in Hong Kong, this is actually more expensive than A7 Mark III, which is, I think this depends on what you can't get over with. For example, I can't get over with the Canon EOS RP and the Nikon Z5, which both of them full frame, smaller camera, cheap. But then when they shoot 4K, it got an APS-C size crop, so why not I get an APS-C camera for video? I mean, especially for me, video is really important. For this one, it is a really lovely camera. I like that it is smaller and I like the look of it as well. But also, can you get over with that it's all the budget cuts? It feels like a budget cut for a lot of things. It don't have enough buttons. And also, if you can get over with full frame, Sony APS-C size sensor camera are really great choice as well. Those are really small. Those are actually smaller, lighter, and there are a lot of crop sensor lenses to choose from. Those are really lovely as well. So if you ask me about this camera, should you get one? I can't answer that because I can't answer that myself as well. Should I get one?